As you might have expected, given how much I praised Series 4 for its consistency, I found these episodes particularly hard to rank. In fact, this was the first list that I actually had to rearrange before writing the script, as I had changed my mind on a few of the placements. Was I right to change my mind? Is this final list the definitive ranking of Series 4? I'll let you decide that. I don't think The Doctor's Daughter is a bad story per se, but in such a strong series, it's the obvious weak link. The inclusion of Martha makes it somewhat worthwhile though, as does the interplay between the Doctor and Donna. These two have such a good dynamic that even their worst episode features a nice amount of entertaining dialogue. I also think the Hath are a great alien species, both in design and execution, even if they do act like humans in every other way. The idea of the Doctor having a daughter is a gimmick, and a fairly boring one at that. I don't think Jenny is a particularly interesting character, and she doesn't stick around long enough to really affect the Doctor. He has a few conversations about being a soldier or having a family, but these ideas aren't explored in any meaningful way, and her death feels like an easy way to set up Tennant's big speech at the end, which also leaves me cold. It's Series 4's one forgettable entry, but it's not offensively bad by any means. It did introduce David Tennant and Georgia Moffat though, so that's nice. Of all the RTD series openers, Partners in Crime is easily the least immediate. But I think I admire the confidence of this low-key approach and the way it allows our main cast to breathe. The Doctor-Donna dynamic is one of the best things about Series 4, and Partners in Crime emphasises this pairing thanks to its functional but unobtrusive story. That's not to say that the plot is bad, it's not. I like the plan of the Adipose family, and Miss Foster is a confident presence throughout the episode. Given the amount of comedy in the story, I think a more threatening villain or involved plot would end up feeling cheap or wasted. The antagonists have to be threatening enough to provide an illusion of jeopardy for the Doctor and Donna, but not so much that it overshadows the humour, and Partners in Crime walks this line perfectly. It's not as important as Rose or as exciting as Smith and Jones, but the sheer number of great scenes more than justify its existence beyond just setting up the series. That meeting scene alone is worth watching for. I think the Ood are one of the best species to come out of the revival, and I'm glad they got at least one story that really explored their culture before being relegated to mostly comic relief stand-ins. Planet of the Ood isn't a subtle story, but I don't mind its blunt messaging given the nature of the issue. Like, not to get all political or anything, but I do actually think slavery is bad. You would think that such a cut-and-dry morality tale would feel predictable, but there's enough mystery surrounding the events of the Ood uprising to maintain the tension. The lead up to the climax is well paced, and the Ood themselves have a good amount of agency in their own rebellion. It's not just the Doctor saving the day. I think the only real problem is the clumsy action set piece involving the giant claw. It just feels a bit forced, like they needed to include an action scene, but it's a minor issue overall. Planet of the Ood is already a good story on paper, but everything about it is accomplished so proficiently as to make it stand out more than it otherwise would. The production is great, the set design is flawless, and the Doctor and Donna are as enjoyable as ever, with no shortage of great moments. I can't imagine it ever being my favourite episode, but it's one of the many quality stories that make Series 4 feel so consistent. If this is one of your lesser episodes, then you're doing something right. For the longest time, I didn't like Silence in the Library or Forest of the Dead, and saw it as a genuine misfire in an otherwise solid series. I think when I was younger, I just found it confusing, and by the time I was old enough to understand it, I was so disappointed by River Song's subsequent appearances that her presence in this story kind of ruined it for me. And sure, her enigmatic dialogue is still a bit frustrating, suggesting a potential that wasn't always fulfilled, but it's no longer a major issue for me. I'm able to enjoy this story for what it is, and it's a great place to be because it's one of the most jaw-droppingly creative episodes in the show's history. In some ways, Silence of the Library, Forest of the Dead feels like an amalgamation of the ideas explored in Moffat's earlier episodes. It has a creeping, zombie-like threat similar to The Empty Child, a split setting like The Girl in the Fireplace, and a timey-wimey element reminiscent of Blink thanks to River's future relationship with the Doctor. New ideas are added too, of course, and the end result is a slick story that never feels hindered by budgetary or production limitations. The library is an awe-inspiring location, and it feels suitably expansive for such a high-concept story. I think the action element of the Vashta Nerada is spread thinly over 2 episodes. You can only run away from the spacesuits for so long, and so I'm glad to have the subplot with Donna and her fictional life. The way the episode demonstrates the time dilation of this world is really clever, and the final scene of Donna with her children is absolutely heartbreaking. I also love the scene afterwards where her and the Doctor share a wonderfully understated conversation about everything that has happened. I do quite like the final interaction with the Vashta Nerada, but as a resolution to the story, it's a tad unsatisfying considering the strength of the premise and the build-up. With that being said, I want to praise the final sequence of Forest of the Dead. I think it's truly exceptional. Seeing Tennant run through the library to save River, his long coat flying behind him as the Doctor's theme plays in the background, is one of the purest distillations of his character I've ever seen. It's an unashamed display of dramatic, joyful heroism, and it honestly makes me well up a little bit. It's moments like this that remind me why I love this character so much, and why the show has stayed with me for as long as it has. When I was a kid, the Doctor was my hero. It's moments like this that remind me why. It's so good to finally have a historical story that properly outlines the debate about changing history and uses it to further the drama between the 2 leads. The Fires of Pompeii is a fairly run-of-the-mill pseudo-historical, but the interplay between the Doctor and Donna, especially during the final scenes, turns it into something truly special. The plot isn't anything too unusual. An alien species lands in ancient Pompeii and wants to turn Earth into their new home. We've seen it before, but I think the episode does get a lot of mileage out of this basic premise. The Sibylline Sisterhood are a great inclusion, imbuing the science of the Pyrovillian clan with a spooky sense of mysticism, and the interplay between Caecilius and his family is enjoyable as well. The episode also looks fantastic. For most of the runtime, this is a fun historical romp. It's amusing to see the Doctor fight off the Paravar with a water pistol, or to see Donna try to speak actual Latin to a street vendor, but it's the final 10 minutes or so that really make this one stand out. The conversation between the Doctor and Donna in the TARDIS is phenomenal. Catherine Tate is especially good here. The way that she breaks down whilst trying to convince the Doctor is so powerful. This disagreement surrounding what to do in Pompeii has been bubbling for the whole episode, but it's in this scene that their 2 positions are outlined the best. It's Donna's emotion against the Doctor's cold reason, and his capitulation to just save someone is so rewarding. It feels odd to have this episode placed so low, given how much I enjoy it, but it's just a necessity when trying to rank so many quality stories. Make no mistake, I think The Fires of Pompeii is a brilliant pseudo-historical, one of my favourites for sure. Like I said in the retrospective video, the Sontaran stratagem, The Poison Sky, could have been a series finale, given the stakes and the sheer number of great moments. The Sontaran stratagem isn't a bad episode, far from it, it's just a lot of build-up. I don't mind a slow first part if it leads to a strong follow-up though, and The Poison Sky is so action-packed that part 1 feels completely justified in setting it all up. As is often the case with the revival, it's exciting to finally have the budget necessary to visualise an alien species. They managed to make one Sontaran incredibly threatening in The Time Warrior, but this is the first time since then that they've had a real presence in an episode. This is a whole Sontaran army capable of destroying Earth, and that's exciting. They're not alone, of course, and Luke Rattigan is a brilliant secondary antagonist in my opinion. He's bratty and precocious at first, but I love how emotionally unstable he gets by the end. Story-wise, I also like the tidy resolution, the way that the atmospheric converter is set up in part 1 and then utilised in part 2. I think this is important because it makes the story feel like more than just gratuitous action. There's a nice idea here, it's not just a cheap conclusion or an afterthought. If I was being picky, I could criticise the fact that Martha is stuck as a clone for much of the second half, and that the Sontarans didn't really need a catchphrase, but these are minor issues. This story is a lot of fun and full of great action. I also really like the cliffhanger. As a piece of writing, Midnight might just be Russell T Davies' greatest achievement. Such a claustrophobic, character-driven story requires a good script, and with Midnight, Davies delivers a masterclass in building tension and suspense. Given his tendency to be over the top, such understatement is commendable. Having seen Tennant take control of so many rooms and situations, it's incredibly powerful watching his usual strategy be turned against him. It's a constant escalation of fear and drama, with certain lines of dialogue representing significant increases in antagonism from the passengers. It's impressive just how well these characters are developed in a short amount of time. The montage of interactions during the initial journey is stunningly efficient. Much like Blink from the previous series, Midnight utilises its production restrictions to tell a unique story, and you can't help but admire the jaw-dropping creativity on display. It's an obvious point, but there really is something terrifying about a creature you can't even conceptualize, and this is true whether the decision not to show the monster is a financial one or not. As much as I love deep dives on lore and in-universe history, I appreciate the existence of something so unknowable, and it works alongside the phenomenal character beats to really bolster the threat. I love a lot of Russell's stories for the show and don't need any convincing on his merits as a writer, but I'm glad that he managed to create such a sophisticated, psychologically charged bottle episode before he left the show. It's endlessly clever, endlessly tense, and more than worthy of the endless praise it receives. Okay, full disclosure, I debated whether to split these episodes up, and if I had done that, then The Stolen Earth would have easily taken the number 1 spot. But I didn't feel as able to rank these two apart, as had been the case for the 3-part finale of the last series, and so I decided to judge this as one whole story. It's not that Journey's End is bad, it's just a slightly unsatisfying conclusion to maybe the best setup to any Doctor Who finale. I know I said that about the last finale, but I really mean it this time. The fact that it incorporates characters from 3 different shows alongside Doctor Who characters from as far back as Series 1 and it doesn't feel overstuffed is a miracle. Right from the start, not a second is wasted. The anticipation I feel watching the Doctor talk to the milkman is as palpable as I'm sure it was when I was 6, and at no point does the episode collapse under its own weight. Everyone is great, but I think the two standouts are Sarah Jane and Captain Jack. The reveal of the Daleks is one of my favourite scenes in the entire show, and they both carry it. I love the way that Jack practically gives up as soon as he hears them, and Elizabeth Sladen's reaction is just, it's incredible. The scale of the threat is almost carried by these two performances alone. The level of destruction, reveal of Davros, and Murray Gold's Dark and Endless Dalek Night all help too, though. I think my main problem with Journey's End is that Donna becoming the Meta-Crisis feels too rushed. She gets shocked by Davros, which awakens the Doctor's intellect inside her brain, and then all of a sudden she can disable the Daleks and thwart their plan. It's explained well enough after the fact, it never feels completely ridiculous, but it's a functional conclusion rather than a satisfying one. It stops the story from being perfect, but even then, Journey's End is filled with great moments that add to the overall story. I love all the stuff with the Osterhagen Key, the German Daleks, seeing the montage of deaths from throughout the series, the companions all flying the TARDIS, and of course the final scenes with Donna and her family. I could talk for hours about this story and still forget to mention things, so I hope my audible excitement is enough to demonstrate how much I love it. It's a shame that Journey's End slightly drops the ball, but any disparity between the two episodes is magnified significantly by The Stolen Earth's sheer level of quality. It's a 10 out of 10 story with a 7 out of 10 conclusion. Really? The Unicorn and the Wasp at number 2? Better than Midnight? I suppose this exposes the fundamental limitation with any kind of ranked list. Journey's End aside, I think the top 4 episodes here are all practically perfect, but I couldn't just have a 4-way tie for first place. Well, I suppose I could, but that would be a bit of a cop-out. Who do you think I am, Russell T Davies? I suppose it comes down to my philosophy regarding genre. I think a well-made comedy is just as impressive as a well-made drama or horror story, and The Unicorn and the Wasp is as good a comedy as Midnight is a piece of sci-fi horror. Both are exceptional, I just happen to prefer the former. I think I just admire how much the episode commits to being both a comedy and a detective story. I'm a big fan of Agatha Christie's work, and to see the show play with the conventions of her books is a real treat. I also think the episode makes the best use of David Tennant and Catherine Tate's insane chemistry. There are few TARDIS teams better suited to this kind of episode, and their unique pairing makes The Unicorn and the Wasp feel more special as a result. Comedy is, of course, subjective, and so I would completely understand if someone didn't rate this episode as highly as I have. Maybe you don't like it when the show tries to be overtly comedic, or maybe you like the idea of a comedy story, but you don't find this attempt particularly funny. If any of those statements describe you, then the only justification I can give is that for me personally, everything in this episode really works. Don't get me wrong, I wouldn't want every episode to be a comedy, but given how few of them stick the landing, I'm glad of a truly successful one to join the ranks of The Romans or City of Death. It's a killer premise featuring a killer wasp and a whole lot of killer jokes. When trying to decide on the best episode of any given series, I suppose I'm drawn to stories that feel unique. Something that I've never seen before or that I'm unlikely to see again. Turn Left is a brilliant episode, but it's also an episode that wouldn't work in any other series of the show. No other era placed as much focus on the relationship between companions and their families or maintained such consistent continuity back on Earth. It's a cliche, but watching Turn Left really does feel like watching a car crash that you can't look away from. Things just get worse and worse without any real glimmer of hope. We learn that Martha died during the events of Smith and Jones, alongside Sarah Jane, and that the Torchwood team, apart from Jack, died fighting the Sontarans. It's a clever way to set up their appearances in the finale, and it's also not too in your face, mainly because the story of Donna and her family is so bleak, it garners most of the attention. The episode does a really good job of balancing big, shocking moments with subtle ones, both of which communicate the horror of this parallel world, but in different ways. The big one is, of course, the scene of Colasanto and his family being rounded up, about to be interned. Wilf's recognition of what's really happening, or the shot of the family crying together, is so powerful and instantly demonstrates the harsh reality of this society. Then there are the smaller moments, like Sylvia's blank stare and minimal responses to Donna in this scene, showing just how affected she is by everything that's happened. I also like Rose's admission that the Atmos threat isn't very pronounced because the UK can't afford much petrol. It's a throwaway line, but looking at the scene and then contrasting it to the scale of the pollution in the poison sky is another stark reminder of how different this world is from our own. I suppose you could view Turn Left as being self-indulgent, but I prefer to see it as a reward for 4 years of world building. It just wouldn't work without all that character work and continuity maintenance, but the fact that it utilises and benefits from this groundwork makes it feel special and unlike any other episode. It's incredibly bleak and depressing, but even then I admire the courage in making it so dark. Davies can often be overblown, but I think his talent here is how he blends a big, broad attack on reactionary politics with smaller character moments that give all the main cast a chance to shine. It's a remarkably creative use of established continuity, a brilliant lead into the finale, and it's my pick for the best episode of Series 4. Thanks for watching this ranking video. As always, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on my list and your own opinions of these episodes. I'm going to be tackling the Davies era specials before I dive into Series 5, so stay tuned for that video, and until then, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.